You're listening to ESOPOD, the Folience ESOP podcast. Hello, everybody. Thanks for joining me on ESOPOD, the Folience ESOP podcast. I am Sean Hoy from IT and the ESOP communication team. Today, I'm joined by Bryan Busch. He is the Learning and Development Manager for Folience Shared Services. Bryan, how you doing?
Good. How you doing?
Pretty good. Had a nice drive into the office.
I did. It's a little bit colder this morning.
Yep. It's about that time of year. It
Yeah.
seems like it held off for quite a while for us.
Yeah, thankfully. Can't complain too much.
I'm expecting to get just dumped on snow-wise this winter. I feel it. I hope
it's coming.
I like using my four-wheel drive, so.
Hey, there you go. It's a good thing to have.
It's kind of
necessary.
Sad.
Yeah,
it's sad when it's just sitting in the driveway, no snow to play in.
Yeah.
So, your title is Learning Development Manager. Why don't you go ahead and take a second, introduce who you are and what you do for Folience.
Yeah. So like you said, my title is Learning Development Manager, which really just means I get to help lead learning and development initiatives across the Folience family of companies. So when you think about, with shared services, the Gazette, Lifeline, Cimarron, there's just a ton there, right? If you think about the entirety of an employee owner life cycle, from the moment that they come into Folience and the moment they come into one of the business units, all the way through what does it look like for how do we onboard? How do we help you get engaged? How do we help you have all the stuff that you need to have in order to be successful here? All the way through, hopefully at the very end when you retire with this, giant ESOP account, but at whatever point that might be for each employee owner. So it's kind of the entirety of that is what we're looking at. And I've been doing that for the last couple of years specifically. And it's pretty cool, right? Because it is, there's just a ton there. And it's one of those things where I always say there's not like a really clean box around that necessarily, because it's always evolving and growing and changing, but it's part of the reason I like it.
Yeah, I can definitely say that onboarding and ongoing training is just constantly changing. Even from IT's side, we're always having to update how we do it and think about the people that are actually being onboarded and if they're different. Yeah. So you're kind of involved from day one all the way through. Is that right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So actually, that's been one of the big initiatives that we've been working on a lot right now is sort of like that from day one part. The way that this kind of all evolved, we didn't necessarily start learning and development from day one or from the day one, from an employee owner's perspective. And so right now we're kind of in the thick of that, of what does that look like? And really it's different, right? Like there's unique parts to every business that's a part of Folience. So, the differences between Cimarron and Lifeline and the Gazette, there's absolutely nuance there that we have to pay a lot of attention to. So we're working a lot with our partners at the business units to figure out what that needs to look like and how to make it the most effective in a way that it needs to be. But
so you said you've been doing this for a couple of years. What were you doing before that?
So I've had kind of a long winding journey personally, which I don't think I trade. I thankfully I've enjoyed most of it. But so originally, and I'll make it really quick, but originally I actually went to school for business administration and psychology both. And that mashup has been really interesting throughout my career. But I started in the financial world. So I was doing, for people on the financial side, I was Series 6, 63, and 65. I was an investment advisor representative. So I did a lot of stocks and bonds and mutual funds and wealth management and retirement planning and all that stuff. And I did that for quite a while. I ended up getting into writing 401ks for corporations and more on the retirement side. And then eventually sort of morphed that into a lot of consulting. So I was working with small businesses on everything from, if you think about that world of financial, there's a ton of sales that go into that. And even back into college, I was working at selling cars to help pay my way for school, those sorts of things. So I got a ton of experience on the sales side, good and bad. But I ended up doing a lot of consulting work with small businesses around how do you train a sales team? How do you run a small business? How do you build recurring revenue so that the financial parts of things are the way that you want them to be? and did that for a long time. But then that mashup of psychology and business kind of took over for me. And I got in working with some full service marketing agencies. Marketing, when you think about it, that like the ways that we're all marketed to every single day, none of us is shielded from that, right? And it's such a psychology world, in terms of like the stuff that goes into that and how, the roles that everyone plays. And so that full service marketing agency was something that I really enjoyed doing. And that led me to Fusion Farm, which is part of Folience, and got folded into the Gazette. And I ended up doing a lot of work with the Gazette on events like Iowa Ideas and helping to train sales teams there as they shift from kind of this, traditional print world to a digital world. And ultimately then led me to this opportunity with learning and development, specifically within Folience. So I've been part of Folience for about 7 years now, a little over 7 years.
How do you see your psychology experience helping you, like, with the training aspects?
A ton. I mean, that is one of those things where, I don't necessarily talk a ton about it. And, when we're doing trainings and different conversations, but it's one of those things that's always in the back of my mind, right? Of like, how do certain messages land? How do people interpret certain things? How do you connect in the best way with people that it's going to sort of make a difference in the way that you hope it does? And so everything, honestly, that, the ways that we build trainings, the ways that we craft messages, all of the things that go into that, it's always kind of in the back of my mind of, there's psychology there that I think plays a pretty big role.
I was going to say with the marketing and stuff, it's like the most effective marketing to me is stuff you don't even realize. Like you're being marketed to, but it's just kind of subconscious.
Right.
As you go about your day. And same thing with training. Like if you can integrate like the culture and the things that we're trying to learn into just day-to-day life of an employee, I feel like that's so effective.
Yeah, I absolutely agree.
So this is all kind of wrapped up in the Succeed program, right? Succeed by Folience. That's the title. How did that come about? And can you talk about like maybe how you developed, like how did you start that?
It's actually a really interesting question. So going back about, I think it was really early on actually when I was with Folience. So I was with the marketing agency at the time. And we had originally engaged a consulting firm out of Philadelphia that worked specifically with ESOPs. And we were working with them specifically on leadership development. And leadership development's interesting because sometimes I think people hear that term and it's like, okay, well, that's positional management, right? So people that are in roles of management. And it's really never been the intention, because if you think about leadership, it's really anybody can be a leader, and hopefully everybody will be, right? At some point, maybe if you don't start that way, you kind of evolve into it. But when you think about establishing culture and expectations and influencing people in positive ways and all those sorts of things. So we were working with this company on leadership development, and they had kind of a 1.0 and a 2.0 version of that were sessions, live in-person sessions that happened a couple of times a year. And a lot of our leaders, positional leaders, so if we think about like the upper management and that throughout Folience, we did go through that. I shouldn't say we, everybody, the kind of people in those positions went through that. I ended up going through that with some other groups here throughout each of the different business units. And we saw it made a difference, right? People liked it. It had a positive impact. People engaged with it. People used it. And then there's also, it's like great and, right? Like what else? Because there was a lot of opportunity that we saw coming out of that of like, what would this look like if we had people in Folience that could facilitate these sessions? Because now instead of having this consulting firm in Philadelphia that kind of comes a couple of times a year, what if we had people here that employee owners could reach out to, their peers, and ask questions to and lean on and bounce ideas off of? And are there other opportunities that we could bring in? And so we ended up having myself and two other people got trained on how to facilitate it. So we were started facilitating that leadership development program. That went on for a little bit, and really what kind of ended up happening is that we sort of evolved and morphed that thing into something that's really our own. So our 1.0 kind of uses a lot of the same type of material. Our 2.0 is really entirely different. We've got a 3.0 now that's entirely new and focused on like managerial type initiatives, but that kind of morphed. And as we were going through those, you get a ton of insight, I think, from employee owners when you have those conversations. So we're in groups, of 15 or 20 people, and we start to hear things of like, what if we could do this? Like, what if we had resources or information, or are there people with experience around this, right? And this could have been like 1,000 different things, which was really cool. And so we started to realize that it was true. Like in Folience, there's so much expertise and knowledge and skills that exist within our business units and the individuals here. That was really cool to recognize. And that ultimately is what led to a number of conversations here of like, okay, what if we build this thing out and we have somebody that is dedicated to learning and development? Thankfully, it doesn't mean I have to have all the answers, because we have so much here. And we have a lot of external partners too that we can lean on. But I will forever be grateful for that opportunity to kind of get to shift into this role, because it's been a lot of fun. I enjoyed it a ton. But that's sort of how the evolution came about. And that's why it continues to evolve from there, is because it really sort of started with that leadership development, and now it's built out. So it's now, we say it's built on 4 pillars, which is Folience Foundations. So sort of all the things that every employee owner needs to know. If you're going to be successful here at any business unit, this is the stuff that you need to know. Systems and security, you'll appreciate that. If that's not on the top of everybody's mind right now, I'd be shocked. But there's just a ton, right? From systems and security, data integrity, all those sorts of things. Leadership development, of course, is the third, and then personal growth. We realize that the more people have the opportunity to grow professionally and personally, the better off we all are. So those are kind of the 4 pillars, and there's a lot of stuff under, each one of those.
I know from going through those leadership development classes, one of my favorite things was just being with a mix of different business units. I know it's hard with geographical distance and all that, but just being able to kind of go through that training together, I think was really helpful to see other people's perspectives and just kind of get to know everybody that I don't work with on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, that is really interesting. So I mean, even when I was at, between Fusion Farm and Gazette, I didn't know most people, right? And I had never been to the Cimarron, I had never been to Lifeline. And I remember going through that leadership development. I thought the same thing, that it's just a nice opportunity. I met some people from Cimarron and got to talk to them. And yeah, I love hearing that from you, because I'm always curious from people of what did you think about, right, when you went through it the first time and you were with people from, because we're sort of so kind of get used to the people that were around every day, right?
Yep. And it was the third party consulting that I went through the training with. So I'd be curious to kind of go through it again and see what's changed and how the experience is different. One of the other things that I really like, just kind of in general, is I don't really enjoy sermon type teaching, or just like being sat in a classroom and listening for an hour. I really like when you break out and talk in small groups and do activities. And kind of, I remember the compass activity where you like go to northeast, southwest, wherever you kind of are as a person, and being able to see your other coworkers and where they are and how you might work together better because of that.
Yeah. I'm selfishly, I'm glad you say that, because I tend to be the same way, where like, I don't want to stand up in front of, somebody in a group and just talk the entire time. So we do it. There's a lot of, almost everything we do is across all of Succeed, for the most part, is, I hope, a little bit more engaging for people rather than just listening to me or somebody else talk. And I'll be honest with you, even when I went through it, it's a little uncomfortable sometimes, right? Like I do this for a living. I stand up in front of people and I talk and on and on. And I'm still a little uncomfortable when I have to break out and talk to people about some things that are sometimes a little bit vulnerable, of like, hey, how do we have difficult conversations at work or something like that? But I think the more we do that, the better off we are, because I always say like half the learning, I think, comes from that, from the experience of getting with your fellow employee owners, even stepping outside of like your own world and learning from somebody at Cimarron and Lifeline and Gazette. That's half the learning experience to me. And so I ended up, man, I love that. And so we've tried to do that with everything that we do across the whole Succeed program, is how can we lean on each other and learn from each other, and have those conversations in small groups.
Yeah, the small groups I think are key. I am not a public speaker. I could talk one-on-one or in a small group up to 4 or 5 people, but in a big room with a bunch of people, something about it just makes me I don't want to raise my hand. I don't want anyone to look at me.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people are that way.
Yeah, don't feel bad. It's funny now. I don't know if this is the purpose of this, but there's they've done a bunch of studies around like the people's biggest fears, and I'm sure a lot of people have seen this, but public speaking is number 1, right? And I think it's like number 4. You'd have to double check me on this, but I think it's like number 4 is death. So as people, like we, generally speaking, across the board, humans are exponentially more terrified of speaking in front of a group of people than we are of dying, which is kind of a fascinating dynamic. So yeah, you're not alone.
That's some interesting psychology.
Yeah.
So another thing that I enjoy, and maybe you can talk about, is in the past we've done development trainings, and it was kind of, okay, we're going to go somewhere for 2 days and someone's going to talk to us. We might do some activities, but then when it's done, you just kind of go back to work and you just kind of never think about it again. The thing I appreciate about the current Succeed program is that we do ongoing like follow-up chats with a small group, like in our business unit or wherever, to kind of keep those things top of mind, and even things that you haven't done for a couple of years, to just get a refresher on some of that stuff.
Yeah, and that has been one of those things where we have tried. It's kind of another one, right, where it's evolved over time. We've tried some different things. We've gotten a lot of feedback from a lot of people on, as we've done that, like, okay, does this work, and what tweaks do we need to make, and we've done that over the course of a few years, because it goes back to, it's like the age-old conference problem, right? We go to these conferences, and you fly out to wherever and you go to this conference and it's fantastic and there's a bunch of information and it's all great and you're kind of excited about what to do with it, and then all of a sudden you go back to work and the day-to-day stuff hits you, and everybody's got so much on your plate already that it's like, okay, well, whatever, the conference was great, but we sort of forget about it in a pretty short amount of time, unfortunately, a lot of times. And so we didn't want that to happen. We really wanted it to be something like, especially if we were investing in it, because it's a real, we tell people this all the time, that it's a real investment on Folience's part of, time, money, resources. There is a very real investment that goes into the whole learning and development world. And the part that I really appreciate, I think, the most about this, and sorry, I'm veering off a little bit, but I think the part of this I appreciate the most is that it's one thing to say, hey, it was really cool that my company invested in a new, computer or a new piece of equipment or this new, robotic sander or whatever it is, right? And those are great. Don't get me wrong, fantastic things that we should be investing in. It's a whole other thing to say, hey, my company invested in me specifically. And that's really what learning and development is it's Folience saying, hey, we're going to invest in you, employee owner, individually, specifically. We're going to help you grow professionally and personally. And there's going to be a ton of opportunities for you to take advantage of, but it's all about you. And yeah, there's certainly like a return to that, right? Folience is saying that we know the more we do that, the better off we are as an organization, but it goes both ways for sure. And so that was always the thing of like, if we're going to invest in this, we want to make sure that it delivers what we hope it delivers. And one of the biggest parts of that is that idea that like we can't take people and we, if you think about even the leadership development sessions, if it's a 2-day session, think about like a manufacturing environment. We're going to ask, say, 20 people to come off the floor for two days, 16 hours. Do the math on that, and you start to realize throughout the course of the year, okay, there is a real tangible investment to that. So if we're going to do that, we have to make sure that it carries well into the future. Like, how do we implement this stuff? Because the things that we're trying to implement there's a direct line, because we know if all the research around it, and there's a ton of research around this that says if we help invest in things like leadership development, take that one alone. If we invest in that, there's a direct line to employee engagement. So the more we do it, the better we do it, the higher our employee engagement goes. And we measure that. We do the pulse survey 2 times a year, which measures our employee engagement. Well, why does employee engagement matter so much? Because there's a direct line that the higher the employee engagement is, there's a direct line to everything from profitability, productivity, lower turnover, fewer safety incidents, higher quality, higher customer satisfaction. All of those things are driven by engagement. And one of the biggest things that we can do to drive engagement is learning and development. And so that's why that's why I get so passionate about this, is because it does make such a big difference. People like it. They're happier in their jobs. They feel more fulfilled. And we know that it sets Folience up in a better spot. And not just, I say Folience all the time, but if you drill that down, it sets Gazette up in a better spot. It sets, Lifeline, Cimarron up in a better spot. And down from there, it sets the individual team up in a better spot, right? So it's every layer that this thing makes a difference. So I'm kind of rambling on this right now, but it's something I get really passionate about for that. Because, so we've set these things up, just from leadership development specifically. For example, we have application groups. They meet every other month. It's a small group that's in your own of peers. So depending on wherever you're at, what business unit, positional peers, relatively. So if you are managing teams or that, then you're meeting with peers that also manage teams, so that you can continue to lean on each other, practice the things that we talked about, and constantly be talking about all of this sort of stuff, so it's top of mind. But again, we try to do that with every part of the Succeed program. Is how do we drive it throughout the entire year, so it's not just like a one-time, okay, went to the conference and it was great, now back to work.
I did training, check.
Yep. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, exactly. You said it's an ever evolving process. I'm curious, might throw you a curveball here. Is there anything that just flat out didn't work and you had to just drop or change completely how you do the training or anything like that?
Yeah, for sure. so there's, and I shouldn't say entirely, there's been like elements to things that we've absolutely said, okay, like this didn't work. So give you a good example of this is even like with application groups where, like I said, we want it to carry on and there's a balance to everything, right? Well, early on we had application groups were meeting every month. Everybody that had ever gone through was a part of it. And it was like the group that went through automatically became an application group. And so you would have people from Lifeline, Cimarron, Gazette, and Shared Services sort of all mixed together in a group. They would meet every month. These resources came from outside of our company. There's a lot of parts to that didn't work very well. So the frequency was difficult, again, because it is an investment. You're stepping away from, the day-to-day work to do this. The combination of the companies was challenging because you had people in, Oklahoma and Kansas and Sumner, Iowa, and Cedar Rapids, Iowa. So sort of spread throughout, and like, how do you work the logistics of that? The material was good, but not directly tied to, like, it didn't directly come from the sessions that people had gone through. And so we actually stepped back from that. We said, okay, we're going to take a break. And during these few months, we're just going to get a ton of feedback. And so we talked to a lot of the leaders and a lot of people that were in those groups across all the businesses and said what works and what doesn't and what needs to, like, in an ideal state, what would this look like? And so we sort of blew the whole thing up and changed it and moved forward. And now periodically I will still reach out to the facilitators of those groups and say, hey, what's your feedback on these points? And we want to know, is this working, or what tweaks can we make? So things like that, for sure, we've made some changes on. And even like the live sessions, there's been things that, so Todd Bransky and I facilitate the leadership development parts together. And I think if you were to ask him, he'd say the same thing, that almost every single time, once we finish, we're bouncing ideas off of like, okay, there's like little opportunities here that this seemed to work really, really well in terms of driving the discussion that we hoped, or like this part maybe fell a little flat. Well, what can we change on that? So there's tweaks that happen every single time. And that's true of every part of it, I think.
How often are you doing like the 1.0 training?
For leadership development, the 1.0, so we basically do 2 1.0 sessions in each location a year. And that's true for 2.0, 3.0 also. So we try to get down to Kansas or Oklahoma a couple of different times a year. And then when obviously we do a handful in Iowa between Cedar Rapids and Sumner, just depending on where. But yeah, so a handful of those. And then, it equates to I say that like it's a really clean and easy answer. There is some flexibility in there. And so we end up doing a couple extras. We'll do maybe a dozen a year of the live sessions, but then we also we've done a lot of work around breaking those out into workshops. And this is, again, based on a lot of the feedback that we got was like, hey, the 2-day was great. It's a real intensive 2-day session, right? You're totally removed from your work and we're just focused on that. And it's great, but man, it is jam packed. There's a ton there. And so we had gotten a lot of feedback of, it would be really great if we could pull, you mentioned like the compass, for example. We did a workshop at the Gazette, all strictly around the compass. And we took 2.5 hours and we met with their leadership team and got together and said, okay, we're going to workshop this. So it's actually a little different than the leadership development session. It's really a workshop of how can we use this information to work more effectively together as a leadership team. And that went over fantastic. And so now we've done more and more of that, where we've pulled out these elements from leadership development, from the full session, and we've done workshops. We've even done it with the Folience leadership team. So the presidents and others of each company kind of get together, and we've done workshops. We just did one recently around how to have crucial conversations. So it was a couple hours together of, hey, we're going to dive really deeply into crucial conversations and then practice with each other. So sorry, I know that's a longer answer than just like how many times per year, but it ends up just being a constant thing of, and again, that's only leadership development, so there's also, the personal growth opportunities, the Folience foundations, the onboarding and all that sort of thing. So it's pretty consistent, which is fun.
What kind of personal growth opportunities do employees have? What falls in that pillar?
Yeah, so personal growth is interesting because it's kind of all over the map. So that one, what was really cool about it is that it originally started based on a lot of feedback that people, not sure if feedback's the right word, but like ideas that people had brought to us originally. And by that I mean, so we have Daisy on as part of our team, who works from a health, nutrition, fitness perspective. So she does a lot of things across, training opportunities across sort of that world of how do you grow personally. And certainly we know, again, that there's direct connections between things like that. I mean, we just did one, Daisy, I shouldn't say Daisy just did one recently around sleep, right? And even that, like, we know there's a direct line, there's a correlation from that to, effectiveness at work. And so we constantly try to make things available to employee owners to do that. Well, when I say that, people brought a lot of ideas and how that personal growth thing built out, because Daisy was already here. She's been doing a ton of stuff, which is awesome. And so her and I have talked, and I think we're both really excited about where this will go, because I ended up doing a mental health in the workplace session with Daisy, which was awesome. We've had people bring us ideas of like time management, just purely how do I manage time? How do I prioritize things the right way? We have had people bring us ideas that we're still working on, and you'll see these eventually come. But things like how do I manage my 401k? And again, that's not anything that we are necessarily going to answer, but we have external partners that we can lean on and say, hey, like we're going to bring you in to talk to people about this. We have people nearing retirement in an ESOP, and it's different, right? Like being in the world of being in an ESOP is maybe a little bit different. So we have people that have asked, okay, if I'm nearing retirement, what does that look like? So again, we're going to have some resources around that. Everything down to we've had people bring ideas of like email 101, email etiquette, right? Or Excel 101. Excel is for sure not my world. That's one I'm going to lean on somebody for. But so there's a lot of things like that go into personal growth. We did some around like the social responsibility from a marketing perspective, especially if you think about even like the Gazette and the ways that they tie into the community. How can an individual play a role in that, right? Like there's just so many different things that people have brought that'll continue to grow, I think, a lot going forward.
So it really sounds like just kind of anything you have an idea about, do they reach out to you directly, or how do people, if I have an idea, how do I make that a reality?
Yeah. Please reach out to me with those. And just reach out to me directly. Send me an email, give me a call, whatever. But those are the ones where I always say, as we look forward on things, I think that there is so much opportunity because, I personally can do what I can do, right? But I don't have all the answers to everything. And thankfully I don't need to, because like I said before, I mean, there's just so much experience and knowledge base and skills throughout Folience. It's the more I have gotten to talk to different people, it's mind blowing. I think how much there is. It's like every individual sort of has their areas of expertise, right? Or their experiences that a lot of times we don't even know about. Like you may have background stuff that it's just like, okay, I had no idea that you have experience in this. And so please reach out to me with those opportunities or those ideas. Even if it's just something you think is just way out of the box, right? Because I can all but guarantee you that I can reach out to someone. And thankfully, that's what I get to do in my role, which is really fun because I can find those people and say, hey, we need some help on this and on how to, manage time better. Okay, well then we can build this out, and that's something I can help with, and we can build out some resources around it so that people have opportunities like that, which is awesome.
Are there any topics throughout the leadership development side, or just anything in general, that you would consider to be like your baby? Like you could just talk about it for hours and hours?
Oh yeah, for sure. So I think in the leadership development 1.0, we do a lot of work around this idea of kind of like managing assumptions at work, right? And what role does that play in good and bad? In what role does it play in conflict? What role does it play in how we give feedback to each other? But this idea of just sort of being a little bit more self-aware. And that is something that I mean, as you can imagine, in kind of, again, that mashup of business and psychology, I get really, really just into. So, yeah, I mean, that one, I would spend hours talking about that with you, because I think that really sort of permeates everything that we do at work, and not even just at work. I mean, frankly, a lot of times people will bring up personal examples when we do these sessions, which is great because you can relate it. But when we come out of that, I hope people think about it, right? When we all go home, and it's something like I'm constantly, every time we do them, it's like a reminder to me. It's kind of a slap in the face of like, okay, you're facilitating this session. Like, okay, now go back and think about it yourself. So it's fun.
That one specifically is like, you wouldn't do it unless you were being intentional. Because like, if you're just going about your day, you're doing autopilot, doing your work. Mm-hmm. But to really stop and like think about like, why am I reacting that way to someone, or that, it takes introspection and takes time.
Yeah. Sure. Oh yeah. Yeah, you're right. It is like the intentionality of that is I think something that, like I said, for myself at least, it's always like the reminder to be intentional about, because unless you are, which I realize sounds like, like a circular, it's like you have to be reminded to be intentional about being intentional, if that makes any sense. But yeah, it's hard, right? I mean, it's not easy, or I think everybody would have all the answers to it.
Yeah, any of the topics, just pick any of these that we learn about through the trainings. None of them are automatic.
Right.
They're all things that take time, and you have to train yourself how to do, really.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure.
Which is why we do it, I guess, right?
Right. Yeah. Yep.
So where do you see the program growing, or how do you see it evolving in the next few years? I know you said that you're doing some more onboarding type stuff. Is there anything even beyond that you're hoping to start or grow into?
Yeah. Yeah, and that's interesting. So like the onboarding, I think in the near term, over the course, because it's going to take, I think, a decent amount of time to really get that sort of implemented across the businesses and in a place where I think we're all comfortable with. So I hope, in at least the near term, that we'll start to see that. So when somebody comes on board, that there's sort of a consistent process that everybody can go through, that they feel really good about, so that we really are helping people to be engaged from day one. And by consistent, that doesn't mean the same, right? Like, it's still, there's going to be differences between each of the business units and each of the teams on the business units. And that's part of why I think it takes a little bit of time to get that implemented, and probably more time than I think we all would hope or would like. We'd like to do it on yesterday, right? But the reality is that there's so many moving parts to that, and how do we figure out the best way for every team and every business unit? So we'll figure that out. Like I said, that's something that we're working really heavily on right now. I think that'll make a huge difference, though, because again, if you look at all the research around engagement and those sorts of things, the earlier we can do that, the better. So how can we bring people in a way that I think we all feel good about and that they feel good about? In terms of like evolving the rest of it, I think there's a few things that'll be really interesting. So, we've talked a lot about leadership development. 3.0 is just rolling out. So there was never a 3.0 before. We really sort of created an entirely brand new 2.0. And the way that we've evolved that is that 1.0 is really focused on individual skills. So just me individually. 2.0 is based on, okay, now how can I take those individual skills and help build really effective teams? And so that's sort of the brand new 2.0. 3.0 now is sort of management position type things. Like, how do I have conversations now from a management perspective, and to build really effective teams? And so that will continue to grow. We're rolling out 3.0 right now. We actually have a session here in next week or the week after within shared services to really start to get that rolled out. With all of those going forward, I think we're going to do a lot more workshops, is because we've got a ton of feedback of how well those work. And I hope, like, I really enjoy doing them, because I think it makes such a big difference with those, because you can get people, it's like, okay, we've gone through the material. Now, how do we pull out pieces of this and then dive really deeply into implementing it? And what does this need to look like? And can we practice? And we get to do those workshops with their team, right? So we're actually going to do one with a group at the Gazette. I've talked to Cimarron about doing some of these. Actually, I've talked to Life. I guess I've talked to everyone in the business units now, they say that. But there's certain teams in there that are like, okay, this part would work really well for our team. Like, here's an area where we see some opportunity. Not necessarily that there's anything wrong or going badly, but maybe there's an opportunity that we could grow here. And so I think we're going to do a lot more of that. I think you'll hear a ton about workshops happening that I hope, right, that are fun to do and make a big difference. And then the last part is the more people have gotten exposure to this, I hope it continues to grow, but it's going in that direction where people continue to bring us ideas. Like you said before, if you have things that are like, hey, this happened today, and it would be really great if I had some resources around this or some additional training around this, or this is just an area that I'm interested in. I think that we've got a laundry list now, and like, don't take that as don't add to it. Like, please add to it because the more of those opportunities we have, the more resources we can go out and gather, and we can gain, bring other people into this. And I think those make a big difference. So it'll just be interesting to see where that one goes in terms of what else, we build out. I think the 4 pillars will probably stay there. For all I know, we'll add a 5th. I don't know, but I think the 4 will sort of, like, the structure will stay where it is, but it'll really continue to evolve over time. But
So when you're not doing training and thinking about psychology, what do you do outside of work for fun?
Well, I guess I don't know if this is maybe not when I'm not thinking about work in psychology, but so I'm also a licensed mental health counselor. So I'm a therapist, and so I actually do that outside of work. But I'm actually so I'm contracted with a local organization that I do therapy mostly for kids and families right now, and I've been doing that for the last 4 or 5 years. So I ended up going back and getting my master's in clinical mental health counseling, and then went through and got licensed and have been doing therapy for about 4 or 5 years. But that's probably more work, I guess. Yeah. But but it's fun. Like, it's fun. It's sort of the same thing where it's work that I enjoy, and I hope that makes a difference. But no, outside of that, so we have 4 kids. I'm married. We have 4 kids at home, so I spend a lot of time in a good way. Like, I love. Whether it's just spending time with them, watching stuff them do that they love, right? Volleyball, baseball, gymnastics, whatever. We spend a lot of time watching. I've been involved in taekwondo my whole life. So we had with my family, we ended up started a school. I ran a school for a lot of years. And then just got involved in some other things. We played volleyball for a lot of years. My wife and I started playing pickleball now. We just finished up a league last week. But really anything that we can get involved with that is, gives you a chance to sort of step away and get involved in something to be active, I guess is fun. But there's a lot going on. I actually I'm doing a lot of writing. So I write an article monthly for the Gazette around mental health. Come out this Friday if you're interested, and hopefully have a book forthcoming. So keep an eye out for that at some point here soon.
So what kind of topics have you covered so far in your articles?
So when I write them, I actually try really hard to sort of connect with what's going on at any given time. And so, like, my article that will come out this Friday, because it's the day after Thanksgiving, is actually all about, and it's state of mind is the title of the column. So it's all focused on mental health topics. But so this one Friday is all focused about sort of the dynamics between it's like overnight, right? One day, Thursday, we're all focused on, the whole culture is focused on be thankful, be grateful for what you have. And then immediately overnight, we're bombarded with messages that what you have is not enough and that you need more, and that material things are the answer, right? And so it's all about that dynamic and how it affects mental health. But so throughout the year, almost any given, holiday time of year, I've got articles about that over the course of I've been doing this for, I don't know, a few years now. So there's quite a few. But so every major holiday, every event, and then there's just stuff that happens. If you think about the Olympics, when Simone Biles dropped out, there's I try to write articles about stuff like that from a mental health perspective of what's going on right now, and those are all there's a whole log of them on thegazette.com. So check them out if you ever get bored, and let me know what you think. But
yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
All right, Bryan, thank you very much for talking to me today. It's been great.
Yeah, no, thank you. I really appreciate this. And like I said, sorry, I know I ramble sometimes about some of it because I'm passionate about the topic. I really enjoy it. So thanks for having the conversation.
Yep. Yeah. Hopefully folks will get to know you in trainings or maybe counseling or read your articles or your book.
Yeah.
They'll
however,
for sure.
Yeah, for sure. No, reach out anytime. And if people have ideas, like I said, I don't have all the answers to anything for sure, but I love exploring it and trying to bring stuff together. So if people have ideas or whatever, reach out.
So if someone doesn't know, what is your email address or a way to contact you?
Yeah, so it's just Bryan@Folience.com, and it's Bryan. So Bryan with a Y @Folience.com. Yeah, just shoot me an email. I'd love to hear from anybody.
Awesome. Okay, well, have a good day.
Hey, you too. Thanks a lot. I appreciate it.
Thanks for listening to ESOPOD. If you want to get in touch, send me an email at esopod@folience.com.